Chapter 21 The Wog Dog in Danger. "What on earth are you doing now?" growled Sergeant Popa one day. "Introducing you to Cuthbert Mark I," grinned Fitz. Cuthbert Mark I was a queer chameleon lizard about 6 inches long. The weird crawlers looked like miniature prehistoric reptiles. Quaintly, one eye would sometimes look ahead, while the other gazed astern. Each foot appeared to be a claw more suitable for tree climbing than waddling across the desert. They moved in a slow, hesitating manner, placing one foot forward, then lurching backwards and forwards before dragging up the other leg. "Can't make up his mind," grinned Fitz, as I held Horrie while Cuthbert Mark I did his stuff across the tent floor. He had a slick tongue, as long as his body. He flicked it out and rolled back like a youngster's squeaker. He was an expert shot at flies, whether on the wing or as sitting shots. The tongue would flick out and with the same movement recoil back into the large mouth. Cuthbert Mark I would then squat solemn and motionless and lick his chops. There appeared to be a hard, sticky substance on the end of the tongue, and when this touched a fly it was hopelessly bogged. "Just as well Murchie isn't here," sighed Popa. What with his craze for scorpions and lizards and beetles and asps, the army is turning into a menagerie. The rebels took to chameleon hunting. In short time Gordy produced Cuthbert Mark II. Feathers rivaled him with Cuthbert Mark III, and the tent seemed full of chameleons, making life not worth living for the flies. The rebel competitors earnestly stalked around the tent, each with his chameleon perched upon the index finger. The chameleon as intent upon this satisfying game as the man. On sighting a fly, the man's finger would cautiously poke out towards it. The chameleon's tongue would shoot out and slide back with the fly. Angle shots, upside-down shots, fluke shots, all manner of difficult shots were tried out to impress the spectators, with the merits of Cuthbert Mark I, II, and III. Cuthbert Mark II proved the best eater. He could gobble 20 flies before his bingy was filled. Mark I could only manage 12, while Mark III lazily declined another victim after he'd gobbled 8. When not doing their stuff, the chameleons were kept in a box at the foot of the tent pole. Fitz made Cuthbert Mark I earn his tucker by forcing him change color often throughout the day. Fitz put such a vivid blue and red colors into the box that Feathers protested, reckoned poor Cuthbert would kill himself turning himself inside out, trying to keep pace with the changing colors. Horrie grew very jealous of these strange pets. Often I would catch him gazing longingly at the box, but I would shake my head reprovingly. Poor little Horrie exerted his willpower, and I could almost see him sighing, but he did not touch the box. until early one morning I noticed that Horrie had a somewhat hang-dog look about him. As I glanced at the chameleons, box, Horrie rolled over on his back with a guilty invitation to play. Fitz sat up yawning, noticed my face and the box. "Finish, Cuthbert, mark I?" he inquired. "Finish," I replied. "Finish, Cuthbert, mark II," came Gordy's voice. "Finish," I replied. "Finish, Cuthbert, mark III?" inquired Feathers. "Finish," I replied. "You cannibal," scolded Feathers, but Horrie rolled on his back and wagged his tail. Time went on. It seemed certain we would return to Australia. Then word was whispered around that lest animal or bird diseases be introduced to Australia, all pets must be destroyed or left behind when we again moved camp. "What are you going to do with Horrie?" asked the Wog Dog's numerous friends. "I don't know yet," I could only reply. Something must be planned quickly. Horrie gradually lost his enthusiasm for parades, even for play. For days on end, we were compelled to force him leave the tent even for exercise. All he wanted to do was lie on the end of my bed, with his big brown eyes staring voicelessly. That dog knew. The boys were constantly dropping into the tent for a chat. It got on our nerves, the way each man would unconsciously lower his voice, pat Horrie and say, "Poor little Horrie," or "Poor little Wog Dog." Horrie would watch us talking, his head on his front paws, his eyes sad and searching. One day Feathers remarked, "I'm getting that way that I can hardly look Horrie in the face." "Same here," said the Gog. As the Gog spoke, Popa tramped into the tent. "This joint is like a morgue," he growled. He picked Horrie up and continued, "Even the little Wog Dog has the miseries." He gently stroked the Wog Dog. The rebels remained silent. "It is a shame," growled Popa, "to leave the little fellow behind. I well remember just before we returned home from the last war, the light horsemen and NZ soldiers shot their horses rather than leave them in the hands of the Arabs. Better than abandoning them to living death under the Arab whip," scowled Fitz. Horrie nosed my arm. "What's the matter, little dog?" I asked, and knew that could Horrie speak, he would answer, "Please don't leave me behind." "What would be our position if we were caught trying to smuggle Horrie home?" inquired Dawn. "If we could actually get him home, maybe we could get him quarantined. Then he'd be all right," answered Popa. "But if discovered before arrival, he would be destroyed. If we leave him behind, it means the Arabs or the desert," said Fitz. "Give him a fighting chance." "He is entitled to his chance," declared Gordy. "He's stuck to us through thick and thin." "Give him his chance," said Dawn. The Gog walked up beside Popa and patted Horrie. "Cheer up, little dog. We won't let you down." "Well, that's decided," said the relieved Gog. We'll have to be careful now. One little slip and there'll be no slip, I said, but it means very careful thought and teamwork from now on. The first thing we did was to sneak Horrie away to Tel Aviv for veterinary examination, just to satisfy ourselves that he had no disease which he might introduce into Australia. Sergeant Popa wangled the necessary leave for Don and me. We found a vet, a kindly, gray-haired man speaking fluent English, a refugee Jew forced to fly from Germany. He and his family had to start life all over again in a strange land. In his neat little room packed with medical books and photos of animals, he examined the strangely quiet Horrie, whose eyes never left my face. The vet obviously knew his job and was gentle too. He appears quite healthy, he declared, but I would like you to leave him with me a week until I can make tests and be sure. To Don's doubting glance he smiled. He'll be quite all right. Come with me and meet some of my little patients. We followed him to the backyard, which was divided into small compartments, completely covered with a wire fence. Here were the patients. One little fellow with his leg in splints. One glance showed us the dogs were well cared for and had no fear of the old doctor. Your little dog can remain here, he said, and pointed to a vacant run. I lifted the uneasy Horrie into the run. Good little dog, reassured Don, and patted him. I could hardly look at the little fellow's eyes. Can you leave some personal article until you return for the dog? Asked the vet, thinking he meant a deposit, and not holding too well, I started to remove my wrist watch. No, he smiled. A sock would serve the purpose admirably. A sock, I inquired. Yes, he will treasure an article with your scent upon it, and will thus expect you to return. I removed my boot and handed the sock into the cage to Horrie. He will be reassured now, said the vet. Say your temporary farewell. We did so, trying to comfort the silent and miserable little wog dog. Anyway, we're doing the job conscientiously, and he's in good hands, I said as we walked back along the street to pick up the leave bus. Yes, answered Don. By the way, it was a good idea about the sock. Yes, but don't tell the rebels, or I'll never hear the end of it. We trudged on silently, and I wondered if Horrie felt as comfortable with the sock as I felt uncomfortable without it. That week was a drag to all the rebels. We realized how very much we now would miss the wog dog. On the third day the Gog said, "Go and ring up that vet and find out how the wog dog is." For the life of us, neither Don nor I could remember the vet's address. "Nitwits!" exclaimed Popa fiercely. At last the day arrived. Popa wangled it so that I must drive a truck into Tel Aviv for urgent military stores, and that truck was in a hurry. The old vet smiled when he opened the door. "The little dog is quite all right," he said. "Come in." With a sigh of relief, I found myself again in the little room. "Come and we'll get him," invited the vet. I called Horrie as he opened the back door. There was a flurry, like sudden wind amongst leaves, and Horrie was leaping up frantically, nearly wagging himself in half. The vet retrieved the sock from the kennel. "Do you require this?" he asked. "Guess I'll leave it." I laughed. Did it do its job? Most certainly it was a great comforter. That sock has remained with the little wog dog all the time. If he walked in the yard for exercise, he carried the sock with him. It was in his mouth when he returned to the kennel. He slept with his head upon it. "Back in the room," he said, "I have been totally unable to trace any signs of canine disease. Your little dog is in excellent health. Should any military necessity prevent you taking him with you, I will readily accept him. All Hitler's armies could not prevent us taking him away," I answered happily. "At least there will always be one of us left to look after him." He smiled and patted Horrie. "So I should imagine," he said gently, "and I know a people who would love an army such as yours. You have a very faithful little friend here," and he patted Horrie again. Despite my insistence, he gently but firmly refused a fee. At the front door I asked, "What breed is Horrie?" He smiled and simply answered, "Just a nice little dog." "Well, we don't care, do we, Horrie?" I asked the wog dog. Plain to see, the wog dog did not have a care in the world. Sincerely wishing the kindly vet the best of luck. The little no-breed dog and I walked out into the sunlight and the truck. Horrie put his head out the window and joyously barked at everything we passed. Back at the camp, Horrie's excited bark brought Dawn to the tent door with the rebels behind him. No need to tell them the great news. "You beaut," was the chorus. I was positive he was healthy, declared Feathers. "Now we know for certain." "No, I hurtle over safely," laughed Gordy. The wog dog was trying to jump all over him. "Good show," said Popa approvingly. "And now I've got some news. Big Casa, the LAD dog, was taken for a ride this morning." Ominous news. "So you'd better not let Horrie out of your sight," added Popa. "And you'd better make up your mind quick and lively just what you are going to do with him." We thought out plan after plan. Once the dreaded order to destroy pets came out, we knew it would be rigidly enforced. Days went by, and we discarded plan after plan. It was by no means simple, as the authorities knew how not only we, but the whole battalion, were attached to the wog dog. It would need no ordinary plan to smuggle him home. The day we learned the AA regiment had received word to move out, we assembled in the tent and carefully fastened it against intruders. Our turn to move next. said Popa grimly. "We've got no workable plan thought out. Now let's get to it, or we lose the Wog Dog." For hour after hour we debated it. One suggestion was to say he was run over by a truck, but if they dug up his grave, there would be no body. Another was to keep him hidden in an abandoned trench a mile from the camp until we moved out, but someone might stumble across the trench. If we said we had given him to some English people in Tel Aviv, then the authorities could check the address. As we found faults in all our schemes, we realized with a queer tinge of distress how difficult it was going to be, and this meant only the concealing of Horrie until we left this camp. There would be other camps then, and the voyage to Australia. The most urgent thing is for him to disappear before the actual move, I said desperately, for us to get him to a safe place, away out of camp, so that no inspection can possibly locate him. It will have to be some place where we can pick him up at a moment's notice, said Gordy, for we may get 2 hours' notice to move in the middle of the night. It was Fitz who gave us the first glimmering of a watertight idea. What about saying that we gave him to a Palestine policeman in Tel Aviv? He suggested, but we don't know his address. Horrie could then be in any one of the numerous police blockhouses in Palestine. The authorities would hardly be likely to check them all. Not a bad idea, said Popa thoughtfully, but the authorities will be very suspicious of that excuse. I have it, I exclaimed. We will actually give Horrie to the Palestine police. I will get one of our own military police to accompany Horrie and me to the police blockhouse on the beach near Ascalon. The provost man will be an irrefutable witness. But how are you going to get him back? Demanded the Gog. I'll sneak him back, I declared. How? Demanded Popa. I'll give the dog to the police, then return here and report to the authorities that we've given the dog to the Ascalon police. A few hours later, I'll hurry back to the police and tell them I want to borrow the dog for a few hours to take a last photograph of him with his unit, and then I'll forget to return him. And if we are ordered to leave at a moment's notice, demanded Popa. Look here, I said, could you manage to detail me for duty with a truck early tomorrow morning? If it was for urgent military duty, replied Sergeant Popa. Very well, it is for very urgent duty. I'll take Horrie and the witness with me and hurry into Tel Aviv. I'll find the policemen all right. Those English police are fine fellows. I'll bet the very first man I ask will willingly offer the little dog a home. Then I'll hurry back, drop the witness at headquarters, and that very night we'll have Horrie back here in camp again. Which leaves only one problem, said Popa dreamily. Until we move, we must keep Horrie perfectly hidden from everyone in camp. The tent is the safest, declared the Gog, but we can't keep him here, although the authorities would know the Palestine police have taken him over. Still, there will be tent inspection in routine, and Horrie would be discovered. It's a pity we could not safely hide him in the tent. "Somewhere, though," said Fitz thoughtfully. "If we could establish his alibi by giving him to the police, then keep him hidden amongst us in this very tent, the whole problem would be solved." "Look!" exclaimed Dawn, and pointed to the cane mat that now served me as a bed. "A hole under Jim's bed." "U-Butte," came the chorus. "If we could hide Horrie underground in a hole under the mat on the floor, then the closest of tent inspections would not find him." Chapter 22. Horrie in Peril. "To work, my hearties," cried Popa as he dragged away the mat. "We'll dig the hideout all ready for tomorrow night." Rows of tents were in front of ours, and to each side, but our tent was one of the back row, and there was only desert behind us. Popa kept watch outside the door. Fitz squatted down with a book outside the tent. Gordy sat idly whistling on the side opposite. I sprawled out at the rear of the tent. Inside, Dawn, Feathers, and the Gog got to work. Now and again, a low "all clear" would come from the three watchers. I would reach in under the tent bottom, and Gordy would place a bucket of sand to my hand. Cautiously, I would hurry to empty it in an old, disused trench at the rear, then hurry the bucket back. We must not leave a pile of damp sand outside the tent. It meant a considerable number of buckets, and there were numerous interruptions, for of course men were moving about all the time. In a few hours the boys had dug a hole 5 feet long, 5 feet deep, and 2 wide, in the tent floor where my mat should be. We lined the hole with packing case boards, and at last, in pleasurable triumph, gazed down at a deep, secure, comfortable hideout. When the sleeping mat was pulled over the hole, there would not be a man in 10,000 who could have the slightest suspicion of what was underneath. All we've got to do now is to train Horrie to stay quiet as a mouse in his foxhole, chuckled the Gog. That night, after lights out, with Horrie coiled asleep as usual at my feet, I lay awake planning details of the coming morning's venture. There must be no mistake. Immediately after breakfast, I set out for the police blockhouse near Ascalon, but without the military policemen. The blockhouses were built at vantage points across the desert, to be used as strong posts in the event of a native uprising. Large, square concrete buildings, 2 or 3 stories high, they were believed capable of withstanding a siege of 12 months. High above each was an observation tower, giving a wide view over the countryside, and also ensuring communication by signal with the next blockhouse in the event of telephone lines being destroyed. Surrounding the approach to my blockhouse was a barbed wire fence. A policeman was busy washing down a police car. He glanced up as I approached. "What is it you want, Ossie?" he inquired. "Well," I grinned bashfully, "I was wondering if you would do me a favor." "Certainly, if I am able to." "Thanks. It's this way. In an hour or so I've got to drive our major to Gaza. After dropping him there, well, the truck's mine for the rest of the day, so long as I don't drive straight back to camp, of course. My mates and I want a last fling in Tel Aviv, but here's the snag. The major always takes his little dog in the truck with him, and I'll be expected to take the truck and dog straight back to camp. I don't want to take the dog to Tel Aviv, lest he gets lost or someone steals him from the truck. So I was wondering if I could leave him here and pick him up on our way home tonight. You Aussies always seem to be AWL, he smiled. It's our last flutter in Palestine, I grinned hopefully. All is set, but I wouldn't like to lose the major's little dog. He's a good sort. What time would you be returning? He asked. About 9 o'clock. I will be working here throughout the day only. However, when I'm finished this evening, I'll ask the duty man at the gate to hand the dog back to you. Will that suit? It certainly would, and thanks very much. Very well. When are you bringing the dog? About 10:30. Very well, I'll be here, and I drove happily back to camp. It's all set, I told the waiting Popa. Now contact the provost sergeant straight away. If you can persuade him to send a provost with me in a truck to hand Horrie over to the Palestine police, then all's well. I'll fix it, declared Popa. Right, and spread the news that Horrie is being handed over to the Palestine police as a mascot. You bet I will. I hurried to the rebels to report progress. The rebels scattered to spread news of Horrie's fate, while I took Horrie on a lead to Captain Hindmarsh and Big Jim to tell them the little dog was on his way to a new home. They were very sorry to see him go, but agreed with me that it was far better than destroying him. At least he'll have a good home, said the captain sympathetically. It was only when they were farewelling Horrie that I imagined I detected a faint glimmer of suspicion in the officer's expressions, so I hurried to the waiting truck, lest I say or look too much. The rebels and quite a few other lads had already gathered at the truck to see the little dog off. Others were coming from among the tents. They were strangely silent. I caught a puzzled, questioning look in face after face. I thought we'd better push off before the crowd gathered. We lumbered away to shouts of farewell, Horrie, goodbye, Wog Dog, good luck, little fellow. Then came an oppressive silence, with only Horrie barking. Ron Ford, the truck driver, was very quiet. He was an old cobber of mine, but I dare not tell him or anyone about the scheme. We had made an unbreakable rule that for perfect safety no one must know but the rebels, of course. The provost in the truck was not in the know either. The truck pulled up outside the police fence, and I jumped straight down with Horrie and hurried inside, lest the policeman, still washing the cars, should stroll out to the truck. The policeman ceased work, nodded, and said, "Tie him up here," indicating a horse trough. I tied Horrie to the trough. "He will be quite all right here," promised the policeman. "Thanks very much." I'll call back for him tonight. Good-o, have a good time, and don't get into trouble." "No fear of that," I grinned. "It takes me all my time getting out of it. So long for the time being. Cheerio." I hurried back to the truck with Horrie's entreating. Barking, ringing in my ears, I turned and called to the policeman. "Take good care of him, please." He waved his arm in reply. "Let's go," I said, and climbed into the truck. As we drove back to camp, Ron said, "Bad luck losing Horrie after all this time." The provost also sympathized with me. I mumbled something about, "He'll have a good home anyway," and lapsed into moody silence. On arrival at camp, I found Horrie the sole topic of conversation. The unbelievable news had spread that Horrie was handed over to and accepted by the Palestine police as a mascot. Captain Hindmarsh and Big Jim unconsciously helped our plans, declaring it an accomplished fact, as did Ron Ford and the provost. They had seen the Wog Dog handed over and accepted. Just in the nick of time, Popa hoarsely whispered to me, "Orders are out. All pets must be destroyed." This news helped us face the boys, for some of them did not take the news of the Wog Dog's departure too well at all. Cal Taylor, the pay sergeant, demanded, "Don't you think you at least could have tried to get Horrie home?" No excuse would satisfy Cal, plainly showing by his manner he believed we had let Horrie down. Major Haupt sympathized with me at the loss of the little Wog Dog, while Big Jim told us it was the topic of conversation during the evening meal at the officers' mess. Bill Cody, one of the signalers, came up to me and demanded, "What's this I hear about Horrie being given to the Palestine police?" "Yes, that's right, Bill." "Then it's a darned shame. I'd have tried to get him home if you'd given him to me." "No go, Bill. He would surely have been destroyed if caught, and you know how strict the order is. As it is, he's alive and in kindly hands." "Are you sure he will be well looked after?" "Certain. They're Englishmen, you know." "I suppose he'll be all right," he said doubtfully, "but I would have given anything to see that little dog get home." Scores and scores of the troops came to us to learn the truth about Horrie. Some were outspoken in their opinion that we should at least have tried to get the little fellow home. We could see that many were not happy about it at all, though they grudgingly admitted it was far better that he be in kindly hands than destroyed. We sensed that others secretly thought we had let the little dog down. The desire to tell them the truth was almost overwhelming, but one whisper might spoil all. We took all that was coming to us, and were not happy about it, keeping up the deceit for Horrie's sake. Now the secret is out at last. Very many soldiers who still think Horrie is a mascot of the Palestinian police will be happily surprised to learn he is at home in Australia. But the getting of him there. That evening I slipped away from camp, a towel over my shoulder as if going to the shower down the road. At 9 sharp, I was outside the police fence. I whistled, and a moment later a little white shape came racing to me, fast as his tiny legs could carry him. The policeman had unleashed him the moment I whistled. I picked up the Wog Dog, and laughingly trying to quieten his embraces, hurried back to camp. Quite a few shadows were coming and going, among the tents, so I wrapped Horrie in the towel and whispered to him, lie quiet, swiftly but cautiously approaching the tent. I was glad to see the rubbish can was in its usual place. Had it not been there, it would have meant we had visitors. Inside, the rebels were anxiously waiting, and I almost spoiled everything by slipping Horrie loose, but Don's hand snatched over his mouth just as he was about to bark. Shh, shh, shh. Horrie cocked his head to one side, looking very concerned, trying to understand what it was all about. We worked hard on him. Obediently, he settled down, big brown eyes asking us what was next. We were about to try him in his hideout when the Gog, who was keeping watch at the door, hissed, "Gow!" Instantly I scrambled under a blanket, making a tent with my knees, with Horrie wedged between them. Big Jim popped in with cheery greeting and sat on Don's bunk. "And what's the matter with you?" he said down at me. "On your sleeping mat in bed at this time of the evening?" "I've got a touch of sandfly fever," I sighed. "Heavens, for goodness sake, don't get sick now." "I'm quite all right," I said hastily. "We'll be okay by morning." "You'd better," he said grimly. "It would be awful if we had to leave you behind." "I'll be Jake," I declared, and quietly spread my hand down over Horrie's nose. "I wonder how poor old Horrie is tonight," mused Big Jim. My hand had tightly closed around Horrie's nose, my knees around his body, in the nick of time to stay the violent wiggle at the well-known voice and mention of his name. "Oh, he'll be all right," I said, and wearily closed my eyes. I dare not glance at the faces of the rebels. Don sauntered to the door of the tent, drawling, "I guess he's pretty miserable, poor little wog dog," and sauntered on out of the tent. "What's the matter with Don?" inquired Big Jim. "Upset over Horrie," answered Popa. "It's a darn shame," declared Big Jim. "Horrie was a great dog. A great—" "Shh," I said, and sneezed to the convulsion between my knees. "Let's not talk about it," I added weakly, and turned over. "Well, I think I'll be turning in," declared Sergeant Popa, and led the way to the tent door. The rebels solemnly agreed they might as well turn in also, and Big Jim rose, yawning, to his feet. He wished us all good night, and followed Popa out the door. Breathlessly, we listened until the crunch of sand died away, and then doubled up in suppressed laughter. "For heaven's sake, don't laugh," came Don's voice as he reappeared at the tent door. "This thing is serious." Presently Popa reappeared, having seen Big Jim to his tent. "I can't stand too much of this," he grinned. "But what is more, I object strongly to being a party to deceiving a very good superior officer." "I wonder really what Big Jim would think if he knew the truth about Horrie," said Feathers. "Couldn't we let him in on it?" "No," replied Popa. "He'd be as right as rain, but it would not be fair to him. Orders are orders, whichever way you may look at it." We were all in perfect agreement. I bet he'll laugh when he finds out. All the same, declared Dawn. And now we'd better train Horrie to his hideout. The Gog kept guard again outside the tent door, while we rolled the matting back and introduced Horrie to his new home, all nice and cozy, with what old clothes we could spare. We lowered him down into it, saying, "Good dog, good dog." But Horrie thought it was a new game, and tried to jump up, while urgent hands reached down to smother his bark. We shushed at him until in sheer disgust he lay down on the old clothes. Good dog, we assured him, and rolled the matting back over the hole. When I'd spread my blanket over the matting, it was pretty dark down there. There wasn't a whimper from Horrie. He went to sleep. At reveal, we let Horrie scamper around inside the tent for exercise. "You'd better suffer a relapse of that sand-fly fever and stay in bed all day," ordered Sergeant Popa, as the boys filed out to the parade ground. "Meanwhile, continue with the training of Corporal Horrie, for if you think you're going to malinger here doing nothing, you're jolly well mistaken." And the old warrior tramped out to parade. So back Horrie went to his dugout, while I shushed him and soothed him all through the morning. He was a bit restless down there, trying to understand why he should not be out on parade on such a beautiful morning. I removed the tin drinking dish, as he bumped it now and then. Such a noise could give the secret away. By and by he quietened under the at regular intervals. The supreme test came later when I heard approaching footsteps. Tent inspection, I thought. Heavens! And in marched Captain Hindmarsh with Ron Flett, the sergeant major. "Hullo, Moody," said the captain. "What is the matter?" "A touch of sandfly fever, sir," I replied. "Better take it easy for a while," he advised. "Very good, sir." The inspection was quickly over. The rebels purposely had left the tent unusually tidy, with all gear stacked in correct place. The orderly officer, with a nod to me, marched out, followed by the NCOs. When they'd stepped outside the tent, I heard a distinct dog's yawn down in the depths below. Horrie had remained quiet as a mouse.